Welcome to In It to Win It. This is Steve Barton, and thank you for tuning in. And thank you for allowing us to do work that we find meaningful. Thank you for giving us the most valuable commodity you have, your attention. We promise to do our very best to give you a return on it. Today we have Peter Grandich of petergrandich.com. We're going to pick his brain on our favorite commodities and answer your questions. Peter, thank you for coming back on the show.
So I'll say to you what I said before we started. You're doing a very good job. I enjoy all your interviews. I believe you're bringing valuable information, and I actually absolutely enjoy speaking with you. So it's no issue on my end.
Well, thank you, Peter. That's quite a compliment. I appreciate that. I love doing this. It's a lot of fun to me, and I think authenticity is probably
It
paramount.
it comes out in your work, Steve, that you love it, and that's why I was the same way all the way up through my career. To me, it was never work. I just enjoy it even to these days, even though at my age now it gets a little bit more difficult to do.
Yes. Well, I hope I'm still doing it when I'm in your shoes. Okay. We got some questions here from listeners. Thank you to everyone who submitted. And last time we had you on the show, Peter, is about 2 months ago. And you said that gold was your number one pick for 2024. And in those 2 months, it has made all-time highs in all the major currencies. Is gold still your number one pick for 2024? Any updates there?
I would say it'd be nip and tuck. Everything matters only going forward now. You'll learn, and I remember from my days of managing money, you're only as good as your last call, and that usually doesn't last that long. So going forward, it would be a dog race between that and copper. I think copper has really come together now, and what's been real surprising positively in it is not only did the forecast that we felt the need for it was correct, but we're finding those that are producing it are having far more difficulty than we might have thought of a year or two ago. And the combination of both those things has really brightened it. I really believe, and there's a few others out there, that we will see a $5 plus copper. May not be by this year, but certainly by 2025.
Yeah, it when we first started talking about it, I think copper was at $3, and you said that four was probably a lot easier than two.
Yeah,
And now
yeah.
we're up at four, and that may be the new floor. We might come down just a little bit, but yeah, I'm pretty excited for copper too.
Yes, Steve, I put a chart out today and I think people should pay heed to it. I'm not into all graphs and that kind of stuff, but since bottoming in 2022, it's made four higher lows without, making a lower high. And that's a very bullish, that's an accumulation phase. Now, of course, this $4 number is always psychological and all, but it was very good that it broke through it, came back and tested it earlier today, as we speak. And then, of course, with the Fed just making it a party for everybody at the moment, it's bounced off. I'm absolutely convinced. And I said in that quote, unless that last low, which was around 360, 365, for some reason was taken out to the downside, I remain very, very bullish on copper.
Yeah, yeah, I like it a lot as well. Okay, I'm going to share my screen here and bring up a. This is so most young people, I think, at least the ones that I talk to, have no fantasy that Social Security system benefits are going to be there when they retire. But it seems like they're doing little to nothing to actually prepare for it. Now, I got this chart from um, Joe Brown of Heresy Financial. So thank you, Joe. And he put this together, the average 401k balance by age. So this over here on the left is the mean, and over here is the median. So the median is basically just if there's 100 entries, they take number 50, and the average is they add up all 100 entries and divide by 100, so you get the average. But we could see that, you know, I mean, I wouldn't be able to sustain myself if I was 60 on only an account of $200,000 here. What's your overall take on this?
So I began the year and followed it up most recently with the most dire outlook I've ever had in the 40 years I've been doing this. That outlook kicks in somewheres between 3 to 5 years from now. It may come earlier, It may come a little later. Very significant issues, and one of them is a retirement crisis with an aging crisis. And I continue to post as much as I can on Twitter, the various studies and showings coming out that people are very undercapitalized, so to speak, for retirement. Even those that well, earning as much as 150,000 are only working paycheck to paycheck, unable to put money aside. And the big issue now is, of course, that the battle will come, and why I say there's also an aging crisis. You talked about those younger people who think they're not going to collect on Social Security. Well, trust me, even though they may not likely collect, they're still going to be taxed on it, because you got to keep paying. There's going to be a cutoff somewhere where the government's going to say, okay, everybody to the right of this ledger is going to get paid. Everybody to the left, thank you very much. But they're going to then protest and go, wait a minute, I'm being taxed out of whatever. I'm paying now for people in their 70s, 80s, maybe even 90, not only to collect Social Security, but the Medicare, so they can have new lung transplants. And I can't even put food on my table. So I believe not only is there a retirement crisis, as you point out, that most people are not prepared financially, but we're also going to have a battle of the ages because of how tight the money is going to become. And this is a government that now is up to $3 to $4 trillion a year adding to the debt, to where even servicing that interest on that debt's going to be a problem. So these numbers clearly point out, and I always remind people in our planning group, they come in, oh, I'm okay, I got $1 million in my 401k. I said, no, you only got 600,000. No, here's my statement. I have $1 million. You have that now, but you're going to have to pay tax on it when you take it out. And a lot of people go, I didn't take that into consideration, Mr. Grandich. Well, Uncle Sam did. And so remember, those numbers that you're looking at are there before tax.
Yeah, yeah. That's kind of sad. That's one of the, I like the Roth IRA because you pay taxes now and you're done with it. And yeah, you can't collect until you're almost 60, but whatever you got in there is yours, so you don't have to do the math later on of what is Uncle Sam going to take later on. Okay.
Steve, I think it's very important. If you don't mind me, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Uncle Sam can only do two things: raise taxes and cut services. Given how we're spending as a nation and all the other issues of immigration and all the excess costs now associated with that, there's going to be a lot of tax raising in our future. We even had now, the Democrats have come out with a new wealth tax. Now, of course, they're starting with the billionaires, but trust me, billionaires will always find ways to minimize their taxes. There's always loopholes. Where it's going to fall down to is the working class. And so don't expect that what you might pay on those numbers you show now, the likelihood is there'll be a higher tax to come out than there is right now. I think that's the way you got to at least plan for it. And if somehow it doesn't, great, you'll have that much more money.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, taxes usually don't go down, they almost always go up. Okay, Joe wants to know, he says, what are the steps to building the arc that you have spoken about? He says, get out of debt and stay there. What other recommendations do you have?
Right, that's what I've talked about, that building an arc right now, because it's going to become very challenging. Somewhere in the next 3 to 5 years, it may come earlier, but clearly within that time frame, I believe the social, political, and economic period here will impact people more negatively than any other time in our history. So obviously, reducing and lowering debt is critical. Also, living a life less is more. I would say in the first 15 years of the 40-year career, when I was mostly a legend in my own mind, Steve, and I was the chairman, if not chairman, at least the CEO of the Me, Myself, and I Society, I wanted everything, all the big bells and whistles, the big homes, the big cars, and all of that. And I learned the hard way that that isn't the best thing to go for. So what I would tell people is learn to live with less. Families of parents and grandparents worked with much, much less on average. And every psychological study shows we're more of a mess now than any of those past generations. So more stuff doesn't equal more happiness. And I think we have to decide whether or not we're going to keep up with the Joneses or not. It's very costly to do that, and it adds strain on. And I think, like I said earlier, if things do get as tough as I think they're going to get, the less your overhead and the means that you kept to yourself, the more likelihood you'll be able to get through those periods.
Yeah, yeah. I see that big time with cars and trucks. I mean, some people have a vehicle that, let's say they were never taxed throughout the year. That's how that it takes them an entire year to work with to buy something that simply drives them back and forth to work.
Well, that's what you have to decide, Steve. You made a very good point. Do you want to get something that gets you from point A to B, or do you want everybody looking at you from you when you go from A to B? After they looked at you and you got to where you got, so what? How could you turn that into something? It's an intangible. So less is more is probably the biggest thing I would say to that person.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, Ren has a question about the ETFs. I think he's basically asking, did the formation, so we've had ETFs forming over the last 20, 30 years. You've got to see this progression throughout your career. Did the formation of all these ETFs kind of take away from the companies that don't make the ETF?
Yeah, in the mining business in particular, I think it's probably more pronounced there than anywhere else. The positive that came out of exchange traded funds for the metals and mining was it brought people in to own gold that otherwise never used to be. In fact, when I was a money manager, I started as a stockbroker and then a money manager, hedge fund manager in the early 90s, you really bought mining shares was the only other way to get exposure to gold. And we had a terrible saying then that we learned in the last 2 years is not true. Owning mining shares is like owning gold. No, last 2 years taught us that's not true. But what's happened there is, so I would argue, and I told you this before we started, that I would say there's less people or less dollars investing in the metals and mining industry now, proportion to everything else with growth, than there was when gold was $1,000 lower. And that's why people are struggling, can't understand gold's almost 2,200. How come these shares aren't rallying? Or how come I don't see people talking about them? Well, one of the other negatives, and there's many, was the formation of the exchange traded funds basically meant if you're in, it's great. You're a producer, you're there and you're part of it, and institutions buy. But if you're out, institutions, they love the exchange traded funds. They're very liquid. They give them broad exposure. You don't have to buy a mutual fund. As a retail person, you used to have to do 20 years ago and pay a fee. But basically what that's causing, and I know it's happening already, small to mid-sized producers are looking to merge so they can get large enough to attract what really is the only interest they see is institutional. Retail is very minimal. It's a lot of things have happened. The cryptocurrencies, a lot of other things have taken away the players down into the more junior type of resource companies. But exchange traded funds really have been they've been a net positive for the physical markets. They've been a net negative for the mining companies.
Okay, yeah. So when these funds buy into something, they may have like a minimum requirement. Maybe they have to put 50 million to work. And if they're looking at a little junior miner that their market cap is only 100, they can't put it into that,
Oh,
So, but if
but
it's in an
and what is
ETF,
yeah,
then they
or
can.
even I think one of the things that's going to happen for the junior market in order to sustain itself or to get back into the big game is it's going to have to form more types of exchange traded funds or something to juniors. Because, like you said, there's no way you can get any liquidity in any of those if you're an institution or a large retail player. And the other thing that happened, which a lot of people don't talk about, is in the juniors, there used to be a 2 year hold when you went into a private placement. Now it's 4 months
Oh, wow.
and becomes free trading. And so that's also added needs for liquidity that hasn't been there. And then we had the real, horrible, the worst bear market in the 40 years I've been in it all. So net, it's tougher now for the metals and mining industry from the mining and exploration side than it was even when the metals were 50% lower in prices.
Okay. Okay. All right. And company questions. Makata, he wants to know about Metalla royalty and streaming. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, well, they're a blog sponsor. A fund that I consult to owns it. It is the one royalty company that I got involved in. It took a lot of hit a year or so ago because it was very aggressive on the accumulation side of getting various royalties. I know it's well over 100 that they have. And they also went into the copper end, but now with copper rallying, I I don't know anything to say this on other than it's just a good educated guess. I think the growth path that they have and how cheap they are relative to what assets they have, they may become a target of one of the bigger royalty companies. I don't know. I don't want anybody to imply that I know of anything and all, but I do think down at these levels with the prejudices that I have, I think it's a royalty company that I wouldn't have a problem owning at this point in time.
Okay, okay. So they spent a lot of their beginning years just acquiring a lot of these,
Yeah.
which takes a lot of capital. And
And they
when,
did a big merger.
yeah,
And and it took a while, and it was in during the worst horrible bear market we were in. And I'll go back to you're only good as your last call. You're same thing for these guys that run these companies. You're only as good as when your stock was high. And if it's not high anymore, you're no good. And so a lot of people have to battle perception as well in that. But the management has sacrifice the short term to build something for the very longer term. And I wouldn't be surprised that some of the other major royalty companies see that. And whether or not they would be open to it or not, I don't know. I don't have that close of a discussion with the management to know whether or not that's even a viable potential. But I think it is a possibility.
okay. And you like the spin or them getting Nova royalty?
Well, I like that they went and built up their copper end of their portfolio.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
especially now as that picture is getting brighter and all. And I think once they get a chance to tell that story and see it, and again, they face the same issues that even the majors faces. I believe there's less eyes and ears now looking at the metals and mining industry than when metal prices were 50% lower. So when copper was 2 and 250, I think there were more people interested than it is now. Now, will that switch once it really starts to get attention? I think we're all good with that unless we don't want a stock market crash because you don't want a lot of that money that could go into it disappear overnight. So don't if you're in the metals and mining, don't hope for a stock market crash. Have it more roll over and give it a chance to move versus suddenly just not having the dollars anymore to go into it.
Okay. Okay. And Mike wants to know, what are your thoughts currently on American Pacific Mining?
Again, I own the stock. A fund I can sell to owns it, and also they are a blog sponsor. American, the best thing I can say about it is, and I can say this about some others of companies, but I've never seen a harder working person than the CEO that runs the company. So I have a big prejudice there for him. They have a company maker that they bought into a company that gave them the interest. It's a Palmer project. It's a zinc, copper, some gold project in Alaska. It's a company maker. It's the largest Japanese smelter is their partner. Even if they don't put up another dime, even though they also get paid to be the operator, it still supports the market valuation now. Now, one of the things that happened that people misinterpreted, and hopefully by year end, I'll be proven right what I'm about to say is they acquired a company a few years ago that gave them a joint venture with Rio Tinto in a project called the Madison. But the JV was very lucrative to the major, to Rio. They did some work, but they didn't do all the work that many of us felt they should have been doing. Now they decided to not go forward with that JV. And everybody said, oh, that must mean there's nothing there. Well, what we subsequently learned is Rio got a new North American manager, and they decided to move a lot of their focus out of North America to other areas of the world. The company itself is doing some drilling because they believe that there's a very big uh, possible VMS under this, a porphyry under this shank that they have. And I believe the management will be able to easily make an equal or better deal than they had with Rio. So it came down, everybody blew it out like everything else that came down. But I'll just say that as long as that CEO is there, he'll always have my eyes and ears willing to hear what he has to say because they just don't work as hard as he does. And many times, especially in the juniors, management is the key. You,
Yeah.
and if you don't have management, you have good geology, you can't correct geology, you can't correct the management. But if you have decent geology, and really good management, then you have a real good shot. And that's what I believe American Pacific offers.
Yeah, yeah. The number one thing in this sector, I think, is the people behind it. Um, and let's see, Super Value is asking about uranium. Says, when do you think the next leg up is going to play out after the current pullback? Do you have any opinion on uranium?
Yeah, so a year or so ago, you would have found me as to be in a roaring bull because it's one of the few markets in a 40-year career that I got in at the absolute bottom, and I got in a huge way. So I decided in late January and February, uranium was getting close to 110. Stocks that I concentrated mostly on producers or near potential producers. They had done extremely well. They were up anywhere from 100, 200% to 500% or more. And I just said, enough is enough. I'm taking my profits. It's not that I think that the uranium story is over, but they don't count until you do it. And by the way, I was getting my head handed me into the gold and the silver and the copper juniors. So I decided to average down for my third or fourth time in 2 years, saying this has got to be the bottom and use those proceeds. And that was the main reason for the switch, other than, and I hope people allow me to point this out, that back in late January, February, if you went on Twitter, there were just everybody and his mother was uranium's going to the moon. Rocket ships, this whole thing and all, kind of like where I call it Bitcoin, but where Bitcoin is now. And when you get all of that, you have to remember one thing. If everybody's saying that and they're being honest, that means they're basically also already invested. Who's left? And a lot of times you need a good correction and consolidation. And that's what you're seeing. I don't think the story is over, but I will say this, Steve. I think it's still going to be very, very difficult for the small juniors to do very well because I think it will work its way back up. I think it still can go maybe to 150 or something, whatever the problems are. But I think people are just not going to throw the money at anything that has uranium name in it. I think they're going to want to see something more than a concept. So my only suggestion would be is, again, focus on producers, near-term producers versus people that, even if they do get fortunate and find something, by the time it gets around to be permitted and drilled, the major move in uranium would be over. But I don't think the uranium story is even close to over yet.
Okay, okay. So with that run up, it's very natural to have a pullback like that because you run out of buyers.
Well, it's
And
actually healthy if you're long-term oriented. It was an interesting phenomenon, and one of the things that I came out of, because I always felt Cameco was the thing you had to own from the time it was $8. But one of the other things that got me out when they announced their results and they showed they were basically short, and the
yeah,
more the uranium price would go up, the more it was going to impact earnings. So quietly, I don't think they'll say it publicly, they probably would live with a $75 to a $90 price than wanting to see 150 right now. And I think it's impacted their share price as well. Institutions recognize that and all. But I still think there's still room left in it. But I think you need to take a step back and put those rocket ships back on the launch pad and just, focus on other things besides that.
try to find the next one. Try to find the next uranium. Gold and copper. Okay. Fire, Rando, and Steven are curious about Arizona metals. So they've got a spinoff coming. Basically, they've got
A proposed spinoff.
a proposed spinoff. Yeah, they're going to vote on it here in end of quarter 2, I think. And what are your opinions on the spinoffs? Can you just kind of give us a quick rundown of the 2 spinoffs that they have?
I can't do it quick, so if you make me quick, know that there's more behind whatever I say quick. How's that?
Okay, fair
I'm
enough.
against both spinoffs, subject to potentially changing. But as of now, I don't believe it's in the best interest for why I bought. People that follow me and a lot of people I've spoken to who I didn't even know over the last year or so that own a lot of Arizona metals. It is a phenomenal story. I don't want people to lose sight that that's never changed, in my opinion. And what they did to develop the K deposit now, to my argument, is already worth 3 to 4, even maybe 5 times more than the current market price. Even if everything stays the same, the spinoffs come through, the same management's there. I think in a few years it'll be worth that. but I think it could be worth a lot more with a couple of things. One, I don't think any of us that bought a year or two ago, or maybe even recently, bought because of the company that they want to spin off, the Sugarloaf. I think a lot of people didn't even know they had it. They were all focused on this key project. And one of the reasons we were so excited was that the K deposit looked like it may only be the third best project to work within this area, and something called the Central and the West may even have more potential over time, and they were never drilled. They got a chance to drill a little, but now they had to go into what they call a plan of operation, where you basically get permitted now to basically drill everywhere. That takes a lot longer for the government to give you permits, then you got to build roads. So suddenly they saw middle of last year that it might take 6-12 months longer before they'll be actively working in the new area. I wonder if that was the case, would they, that wasn't the case, would we even be considering the spinoff now? And my view is this: if we have an asset that they claim is undervalued, but they're going to spin it off and you can make money by it being spin it off, that also means that it could be a future financing in lieu of us having to dilute more. Think about this. The company likes to say all the time, and it's right, well, we're fully funded for our exploration. They are, but they're going to run out of those funds when they drill these centrals and all. And if what happens if the market doesn't recover? Because remember, none of us, at least most of us that I spoke to, ever thought we'd be down at this price level after all the success that's happened here. I rather know that I have an asset out there and a potential to spin off a royalty down the road, to use money to drill further potentially new discoveries in the Central and West, than what I can make getting a spinoff. And so I think it's better. Why should I face dilution down the road, especially if the price doesn't recover and we do make a discovery? We're going to have to put out a lot of shares. I rather keep those things in reserve. Uh, and so that's my thought process on that. We haven't learned yet what one or two of the major shareholders think. I am interviewing one of them, and we'll see what he has to say. He has stated publicly that I know where he's had a chance. He hasn't made his decision yet. I'm talking about Michael Gentile. And if Michael Gentile does decide as the best the spinoff is, I think whatever Michael Gentile does, if I do, I'll be okay. But unless he does, right now, I am not in favor of that. And I rather use these assets down the road, especially when the company had a chance to finance a year or so ago and chose not to. But now, of course, we wish we had that financing. If we had another 50 million sitting in the bank, I wouldn't have a problem spinning off two key assets. But I rather save these things so I don't have to be diluted anymore. Because here's the thing, Steve. I think if and when anything's discovered in the Central, the Western, or other areas, we'll make more money on that being leveraged without any more shares outstanding than anything the spinoff can make for me. Do you understand what I'm saying in that? And
Yeah, yeah.
I think the
I wish.
spinoff is, Steve, sorry. I think the spinoff is more of a satisfy maybe some, people that aren't exactly thrilled because we're really turning it into a 2025 story, but I could live with that. And I would encourage management to rethink that, and see that that is a more viable thing, and do what you did best, and don't take away from them. As much as I'm not pleased, particularly with one person there, they did a phenomenal job recognizing this project. They've done a phenomenal job developing it. And let's save our powder to see where we think things were even better looking before. That story hasn't changed. Let's use our assets so we don't have to be potentially heavily diluted a year or so from now.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing with the spinoffs here in uh, their last report. Says Arizona Metals will make a modest cash injection into both Sugarloaf Gold Corp and Arizona Royalties in order to provide 12 to 18 months worth of working capital. And I'm like, well, what's a modest cash injection? I mean, that's pretty.
And I
Last
also
I checked, they got like 38 mil in cash. How much is that going to
let me
eat
also
up?
add this. I've gotten this from some shareholders, people I don't know that are shareholders, but they know that I've commented so much about it. Is one of the things that has been stated is, well, spinning these things off now, there's a short position in our stock, and those people will have to cover. If we're spinning off a valuable asset simply because of a short position, then I'm going to question management's thinking in general. I can live with that short position. I mean, the stock is so beaten down. They're not taking it to 20 cents or 50 cents or whatever. If that is really one of the reasons to do this, I think it's a poor choice. That's where we'll get to vote as shareholders, and we'll also get to vote on management when the AGM comes. And I do think that that's another thing lacking at the company. It's time to add. They were great exploring, but I think it's time to bring in mining people. If this thing really is what we think it is, I think one of the things that lacks and one of the reasons we don't get the interest that we should have right now is because people are concerned, is this the management team that can take this to the next level? At least I feel that way, and most of the shareholders that I've spoken to feel the same way.
Okay. Yeah, and they're going to have a vote here where if 2/3 of the shareholders, I guess we'll get something in the mail just like we do with every other
Right.
company, and we'll be able to place a vote. And that's supposed to be in quarter
Yeah,
two
so
of.
I told all, I would just say among my close friends and followers, we have 10 to 15% of the stock from like, if everybody, what they tell me is, and that doesn't count what Michael Gentile and another major shareholder does. I would just encourage people now, unless they hear differently, I'm voting no on both spinoffs.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Wrapping up, I love this question. Doug, he says, if Peter could only own one silver miner and one gold miner, where would you put your money?
Well, I don't look at silver as a play on its own, so I can't answer that. I don't follow any enough of a pure silver play. Can I just cheat a little out of that question and tell you, I would look at one area that I like very much. I love Quebec. I'm actually going up. I haven't spoken at a conference in 10 years. I'm actually going up to Quebec City at the beginning of June. There's a huge conference about mining and exploring in Quebec. Uh, Again, prejudices, all three are blog sponsors, all three shares I own, and the fund that I consult to owns. But there are three companies on that sponsor me blog that I all think are takeover candidates. In fact, one already has a major take a position in it, and that's Amex Exploration. El Dorado Gold bought a 9.9%. I believe Amex Exploration, Radisson Mining, and especially Northern Superior Resources, all, well, two of them all have Michael Gentile's thumbprint on it as well. I think all of them are takeover candidates there. I think the big turnaround in Canada and the story who would be turnaround if there is an award of comeback for mining company is IAMGOLD. I think they were brought to the depths of despair almost. They've turned themselves around, and I believe that that has opened up the dam for them to be more aggressive in Quebec. And it would not surprise me, them and others doing major M&A in Quebec now and for the foreseeable future. So I would just cop out with that and say, I would like to, I think anything gold mining in Quebec could be quite interesting.
Okay, okay. I haven't heard that one before. Is there something specifically in that region as far as like politics or something that's really
Well, I can't think of a better place that's more friendly and supportive. Uh, I would probably say in North America, I don't even think Nevada or Arizona is more favorable. Uh, Ontario probably is close, but it's just, it's second nature. It has very favorable terms, and it has a lot of great projects. You know what happened there, and Northern Superior has recognized that. There were a lot of little great projects, but they work better if they all kind of come together. And then, of course, when a big daddy comes along and swallows the fish that had swallowed the minnows. And that's kind of what the hope I have for Northern Superior Resources. I like to say they're both the acquirer and the potential acquiree, but it's a very, very, very good place to work. Everybody I've known for as long as I've been in the metals and mining, have always spoken very favorable about the province, the politics, how supportive they are to that part of their economy.
awesome? Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Peter. Do you have any final thoughts? Where can people find you?
Well, I was hoping they were not looking for me a few months ago, but now that we've had a little rally, some people are looking again. PeterGrandich.com is the blog. Mostly do most of my work now day to day on Twitter. And there's also a YouTube channel where I put up interviews like yourself. And when I get to interview you, which we'll probably do for soon as well, I can't begin to tell you how much I enjoyed this interview and just the work that you're doing, Steve. Thank you. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Well, thank you, Peter, and thank you for always being here. Check out Peter's website, his YouTube channel, and Twitter. We will put links down below. And thank you for tuning in. Hit the like and subscribe, and share this with anyone that you think needs to hear it. It's probably your buddy that can't stop talking about tech stocks. You have yourself a great rest of the day, and we will talk to you next time.